Hey folks, Fernando doing another video here for the channel, and one of the more debated topics in the survival prepper community: how much ammo do I actually need? This is a very common question that you see in so many forums, and people have a number of possible answers, like realistically for fighting, for defense, maybe a couple boxes, maybe even one box of ammo is more than enough than you'll ever need. But then of course you're looking at, okay, what about practice? What about training? And here is where people come with a huge variety of answers and numbers, and none of those is the right answer. It's going to be depending on whatever activity you're involved in, your kind of lifestyle, what kind of shooting are you involved in. Are you a competitive shooter? You're shooting thousands of rounds each weekend? Okay, that's going to be you. A cop that has a gun and he practices with certain regularity, a lot less than what most people think. Okay, that's what you're going to be needing. A hunter shoots very, very little actually. It's more about accurate shot placement and little else. So it's not like you're going to be needing thousands of rounds each year for your typical hunter. Having said that, some types of hunting activity, especially when it's involving pest controls, I mean, there's dove shooting in Argentina where they shoot thousands of rounds, and those things never stop because it's a plague. So you can shoot all day long as much as you want, and you won't even put a dent on the population of these birds. So it is one of those almost impossible to answer questions, but I'll give it a go and let me know if this makes sense for you or not. So I'll start my answer to the famed question with Wild Bill Hickok, the famous gunman, sheriff of the legendary figure of the West, of the American West, right? A man that was involved in several gunfights, duels. He was a sheriff, and well, he is a pretty noticeable figure. And one of the things that I always found interesting of him was that he always emptied his guns every single day and reloaded said guns. He is famous for having with him at a certain point in his life 2 Colt revolvers, 1851 Navy models, .36 caliber revolvers. So, and this is several accounts of people that have witnessed this, and it's pretty well, registered that he would shoot his 2 revolvers every single day. He would get up in the morning. He usually lived, out of town. He would shoot either from the door or walk a little bit further and shoot one revolver and then the other. He carried 2 revolvers, but he didn't just dual wield them. He is, according to most witnesses, as far as I know, in most of the cases that people saw him shoot, be involved in fights, he shot 1 revolver at a time. Why have 2 revolvers then? Well, because of reloads. When you have a black powder revolver that needs to be charged each cylinder manually, there's no fast reloading. Even with a revolver like my Python here, I have a speed loader that really takes a couple seconds to reload. It is very, very fast, especially with just a little bit of practice. You get there very quickly, let alone with a semi-automatic pistol, which has. But in terms of capacity, in terms of having more ammunition at his disposal, that's why he carried 2 revolvers. What he would do is he would shoot 1 revolver, reload that revolver, and then shoot the other one. Why? So as to never be left without a loaded gun. Wild Bill Hickok was this charismatic, almost like a celebrity figure back in the day. So he dressed very smartly. He was very polite around the women, and he was, mostly he was a gambler by what I've read about him. It seems that was his his real thing. Yes, the lawman and all of the rest of the stuff, but he was mostly about playing cards, gambling, and so on. And he knew that because of his lawman profession and because of his gambling thing, he was always a little bit at risk of getting involved in fights, especially as his reputation grew. Someone was likely to think of, oh, okay, I'll shoot this guy and make a name for myself in doing so. So not being quite smart, he always tried to have a gun with him, and that's what he did. So besides this, it's the fact that with black powder revolvers, you have to actually load the powder put the projectile, the primer, all of this for each round you fire, and this is a lot more sensitive to humidity than metal cartridges that we enjoy today. There's simply no comparison. And yes, there's little tricks and things you can do, sealing it with wax or grease and using good materials and being very meticulous about how clean everything is. You can have a black powder revolver loaded for years and it will still work when you fire it. But Wild Bill Hickok was not betting his life on that, so he rather have the habit of reloading it each time. Besides that, it also gave him the opportunity to actually shoot and practice. I don't know exactly what kind of training he did in those rounds. I mean, based on what I read, he didn't even use a holster many times. So maybe it was just a matter of just drawing from the waist with whatever belt he had, shooting it, reloading it, then loading the other. And that is it. Now, as simple as that seems, if you do that every single day for pretty much your entire life, you will have a rather elevated muscle memory and you will be a lot better at shooting and actually hitting what you're shooting at than the average guy, even the average guy out there with a gun. That is for Wild Bill Hickok. Now, keeping in mind the historic context, the difference in technology, I'd go with something like this: 50 rounds per month. Right? That is a number that I feel comfortable in not doing any kind of advanced training or anything like that, but a minimum amount of muscle memory, dexterity, accuracy. With 50 rounds a month, I can tell you that you can sustain that pretty well. I can tell you that if you're meticulous about it and you do a lot of dry fire, and before anyone freaks out, yes, these are snap caps, these are, you know, it's not live ammunition, right? But if you do a responsible amount of dry fire practice in terms of drawing your gun, shooting the gun, even when dry firing, you repeat that and you practice that, let's say every single day a couple of times, pretty much imitating what Wild Bill Hickok did. Keep in mind, he actually had to fire it to reload it. It's not that he was looking to waste any ammo. I mean, if you have to do it anyway, sure. But he was mostly looking at keeping his guns in good order, in good working order, and yes, practicing while at it. You can practice that in terms of drawing, aiming, and pulling the trigger all you want with that dry fire technique. This is the kind of thing that I do explain dedicated chapters to dry firing and training and how to actually fight with your gun. Street survival skills, guys. That's why I always have my book around, because all of these things, they are there explained in a much more better way with graphics and drawings and all that stuff. But dry fire is something, I mean, there's even a very well documented case of some South African shooters that competed and actually won a tournament even though they didn't have enough ammunition. What they did mostly, it was like 99% dry fire, and the little ammunition they had, that was the only live ammo shooting, and they actually won the competition in which they participated in. So there's a lot to be said about dry fire. You can do that every single day. And going back to how much ammo I actually need, with 50 rounds of ammunition, a box of ammunition, you can use that and maybe go to the range 4 times a month. Every weekend you go to the range, and you don't do the silly thing that people that have no clue do, that I've done myself for years, which is you buy a box of ammunition, you shoot it at a target, and you try to get your group small. That is fun and good, and that's fine, that's perfect. But that is not something that's gonna be doing you any favors in terms of maintaining or improving your fighting skills with a gun. What you want to do is a lot of dry fire, drawing, aiming, and shooting. And when you do live fire practice, you just get your magazines, you put maybe 4 rounds in each one, and what you do is draw, shoot a couple times, shoot a couple times on our target, change magazines a couple times again, and you just shot 8 rounds. Okay, so that is something that's gonna be a lot more helpful than a full magazine and boom, 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 mag dump on a paper target. You do this all and in fact, I can tell you that with some of the more advanced fires training that I've done, and I've done it, I can tell you that when you're working with a group of people, dynamic entry, you do so much dry fire, it's downright boring until you get it down like a science. And then when you finally do the live run, the live ammo run, it's just a couple rounds that you shoot. You don't shoot a lot more than that. Maybe it's a hostage target. So you move around with a lot of people and a couple rounds from one of the guys, and that is it. You end up shooting less in some of these exercises than in some of the beginner classes where you go for 500 rounds or 1,000 rounds in some cases. But a box of ammunition, if you're smart in how you use it, you will see a lot of benefit from that. But going back to the question, okay, so how much ammunition do I need? 50 rounds a month, a box of ammunition a month. That's going to be giving you enough skills as to sustain or even improve your shooting ability. That's going to be 600 rounds a year. How many years do you plan on shooting? Well, maybe as long as you're alive, you want to learn how you want to keep that ability. Okay, middle-aged, somewhat guy, if you're going for 50 years, 600 rounds, you're talking about the golden number. It's going to be for, depending on your age and so on, 30,000 rounds. That's going to be $9,000 in today's money, in today's prices, just to have 30,000 rounds of 9mm factory ammunition. That is a number that I feel is pretty good. I think that's very realistic. Now, do you have 30,000 rounds? Probably not. Maybe you're planning on later acquiring more ammunition at some point in your life. But keep in mind this number as well. 600 rounds of ammunition per year, that is very realistic. Maybe you can stretch that quite a bit. Maybe you can reduce the amount of live fire that you do to maybe 25 rounds a month, right? 25 rounds a month, just a few rounds each weekend, right? Maybe you can do that. But this is a number I feel is a good starting point so as to play this game. Now, in terms of, what about if I go hunting? Well, let's say you have your revolver, right? And you have a 357 Magnum, maybe, something like this beautiful Python here that I have. Well, if you go hunting, it's not going to be putting a dent on this number. Hunters don't spend a huge amount of ammunition, especially in this kind of, large game hunting, and it's not like, pest control or anything like that. Well, still, it's going to be just a few rounds. What about if I get into fights? Well, again, you're not going to be shooting hundreds of rounds per gunfight every weekend or anything like that. This number still applies. Even if you're talking about a, war, like a military conflict, or like being a partisan fighter after an invasion or whatever it is, you're still looking at, the average soldier has what, 5, 6, 7 magazines, 30 rounds, and how many of that does he actually fire, for how long? You're not going to be sustained, being involved in sustained gunfights where you fire thousands of rounds at enemies. I mean, eventually you'll run out of ammunition, or you'll run most likely out of luck. This number, I believe, still applies. Hopefully, if you do end up surviving thousands of rounds of ammo fired in battles and military conflicts, well, hopefully you'll be able to purchase ammo further down the road. But yeah, I think that's pretty solid. Guys, let me know what you think. I think that's a good number. Even if you have, for example, a rifle that goes along with it. Let's say you have a lever action 357 Magnum rifle that you use for hunting. Same thing, same ammunition, and the most amount of practice that you still need is usually going to be involving your handgun, the gun that is most difficult for you to learn to shoot properly and accurately and sustain that level of skill. See you on our next video. Take care. You have my book available in Amazon below, and for the economic aspects, Surviving the Economic Collapse, available in those links, Amazon and so on. See you on the next time. Take care.